The electric vehicle transition is well underway in China. Last year, roughly one-third of all new cars sold in the country were electric. One EV company predicts the share is going to pass 50% by June 2024. And more broadly, around half of China's total installed electricity generation capacity already comes from non-fossil fuel sources, including hydro, solar, and wind power. What does this ongoing transition away from fossil fuels mean for China's oil industry? And how will a slowdown in China's oil imports ripple around the world? I'm Shannon Tiezi of The Diplomat, and this is Behind the News. With me today to discuss the geopolitics of China's energy transition is Dr. Erica Downs, who is a senior research scholar at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University SIPA. Erica, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
China's government is strongly backing this energy transition. Has there been any pushback from its oil giants, which are also state-owned enterprises?
So China's national oil companies, or NOCs, are in an interesting space right now. On the one hand, ensuring energy security and specifically ensuring China's oil and natural gas supplies is still job number one for these companies. But at the same time, China has set targets for carbon peaking by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. And so China's NOCs, like other state-owned enterprises, are certainly under pressure to make sure that they're doing their part to support those targets. Plus, as you just mentioned, these companies are well aware of the increasing number of EVs on the road in China. They're certainly aware that China's gasoline demand could be peaking very soon. One company, in fact, even projected that it would peak last year. And so because of that, these companies are trying to balance ensuring oil and natural gas supplies on the one hand, and on the other hand, doing things to prepare for the energy transition. And this is not just about demonstrating to China's leaders that they're supporting the carbon neutrality and carbon peaking goals. It's also about adapting to an environment in which China's gasoline and diesel demand will be declining. And so the companies need to find a way to thrive and survive in this new environment.
So how are China's national oil companies preparing for a green future?
So the companies are doing a number of different things. One, they are publishing their carbon emissions, and two companies, PetroChina and Sinopec Corporation, are also publishing their methane emissions. And this is important because you can't manage with what you don't measure. Other things that the companies are doing to prepare for the energy transition include installing wind and solar plants to power their facilities to replace diesel and natural gas. The companies are also investing in green hydrogen, in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And the companies are also shifting their service stations to move from places where you go to fill up on diesel and gasoline to places where electric vehicles can charge, where there can be battery swapping, where cars and vehicles can fill up on LNG and hydrogen. So companies are doing a number of things, and they're basically trying to evolve from oil and gas companies to integrated energy companies. And there's actually one more thing I would like to highlight that the companies are doing. They're also looking to put more crude into chemicals, more crude oil into chemicals to produce many of the materials that China needs for the energy transition. So to producing materials that are used to manufacture wind turbines and solar panels and batteries for electric vehicles. So there are a lot of different things going on.
So as China's oil companies prepare for a future where there's less purchases of gasoline and diesel, China is the world's largest importer of oil right now. So would a cutback in China's oil purchases impact oil exporters, and what sort of ramifications might that have for China's major sources of oil?
So that's a really interesting question, and I'd like to talk about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is one of China's top oil supplier. They were for a long time, they were China's top crude oil supplier on an annual basis. That changed last year with Russia taking over the #1 slot on an annual basis. But Saudi Arabia is still a large oil supplier to China, and they want to make sure that they continue to have a share of China's crude oil imports. So one thing that we've seen Saudi Aramco, Saudi Arabia's national oil company, do is enter into agreements with independent refineries in China. In some cases, Saudi Aramco is investing in these refineries. They're also signing supply contracts. And I think the idea here is just to make sure that even, when China hits peak oil demand, which China's national oil companies expect is going to happen by 2030, that, looking out to 2030 and even beyond, that Saudi Arabia is going to have a share of China's crude oil imports.
There's a potential for a mismatch between China, which sees itself as the new energy champion, and some of these major oil exporters, whose economies heavily rely on fossil fuel imports. Do you see these tensions impacting China's overall relationship with the Gulf countries moving forward?
So again, going back to China and Saudi Arabia, another thing that China is doing as it prepares for the energy transition is looking to supply countries around the world with the technologies that they need to move to a lower carbon future. And in the case of Saudi Arabia and other countries in the Middle East, I think the message that China and Chinese companies are sending to these countries is, look, we understand that you want to diversify your economies away from oil, and we are here to help. And, one of the things that we can do is invest, for example, in solar panels, in the production, of solar facilities in your countries. There have also been some agreements between, China and Saudi Arabia to manufacture electric vehicles in the kingdom. And so this is another way that these countries are jointly preparing for the energy transition. So crude oil is almost certainly going to remain a key component of the relationship between China and Saudi Arabia for many years to come. But at the same time, we are already seeing the energy transition impacting the relationship between these two countries. So yes, oil remain the core of the relationship, but we are seeing Chinese companies, investing in clean energy technology in Saudi Arabia. We are seeing Chinese companies partnering with Chinese companies to develop clean energy projects in Saudi Arabia and in other countries in the region.
So are we seeing similar dynamics between China and Russia, which, as you mentioned, recently overtook Saudi Arabia as China's largest source of oil imports?
We're not seeing the same dynamics with China and Russia. Russia is a big fossil fuel supplier to China. Most notably, they were China's largest oil supplier in 2023, accounting for 19% of China's crude oil imports. They're also a major supplier of coal to China and a growing supplier of natural gas, both pipeline and LNG. However, there does not seem to be a lot of cooperation between the two countries in terms of preparing for the energy transition. I think Russia's probably biggest hope is that China will give a green light to the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. This is a project that's become even more important to Russia since the invasion of Ukraine, because it represents Russia's best hope to take a portion of the pipeline gas it was previously sending to Europe and find a new market for some of it. And Russia's strategy, I think, is to present this project as a green energy project, as a source of clean energy for China. And, on the one hand, yes, natural gas, as, Chinese oil executives have said, is a lower carbon, fuel than coal or oil. And if, natural gas substitutes for coal and methane emissions are controlled, then, yes, natural gas is a cleaner source of energy for China. But it's unclear at this point whether this project is going to move off the drawing board. There are a number of factors that are at play here, including, does China need the gas? No, not right now. Perhaps in 2040, will China be able to get the price that it wants, for the supply contract? And then, of course, China has to think about to what extent they want to be dependent on Russia versus LNG delivered through the sea lanes.
Well, thank you, Erica, for talking us through some of the economic and geopolitical implications of China's green energy transition. Thank you to everyone at home for tuning in. Please subscribe if you would like to see more videos like this, and we hope to see you next time on Behind the News.